Pregnant and alone, she was picking out her son's Layette when she ran into her ex-husband with his new girlfriend, and what happened next no one expected. The baby boutique was a sanctuary of pastel tones and whispered promises. The air smelled of baby powder and fresh cotton, a scent that soothed the soul and cradled the dreams of any mother. Olivia Thompson, with her hand resting on the prominent curve of her 5-month belly, felt a fragile peace as her fingers slid over a rack of tiny onesies. Each piece was a small declaration of love to the boy growing inside her, an entire universe she was building alone. The baby blue seemed too serene, the navy blue too serious. She was immersed in this trivial dilemma, a moment of pure and simple anticipation, when the world around her shattered. A familiar laugh, a sound that had once been the soundtrack of her happiness, cut through the store's silence. She turned slowly, her heart already pounding a warning against her ribs. And there he was. Lucas Harrington, her ex-husband, the architect of her loneliness. He wasn't alone. At his side, with his hand possessively on her slim waist, was Kate Sinclair. Tall, impeccably dressed in a white blazer that screamed power and sophistication, she was the antithesis of everything Olivia felt in that moment. Kate's blonde, straight hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her smile was a work of art, polished and bright, directed at something Lucas whispered in her ear. They looked like a couple from a magazine editorial, perfect, untouchable, completely oblivious to the emotional cataclysm they had just detonated a few feet away. Olivia froze, the sky-blue onesie forgotten in her hand. A desperate desire to blend into the shelves, to disappear behind a stack of diapers, overwhelmed her. But her body refused to obey. Blood pulsed in her ears, a toxic mix of shock, anger, and a pain so deep it felt physical. The truth was a slow poison. Lucas had left her 3 months ago, right after the joy of the pregnancy was revealed. The excuse had been vague, a cowardly cliché about needing space, finding himself. Apparently, he had found himself in someone else's arms, and now fate, with its cruel irony, placed them in the same aisle, the baby aisle. The realization hit like an anvil. They weren't there by chance. They were shopping for baby items. Olivia's mind short-circuited, unable to process the avalanche of questions whipping at her heart. Was Kate pregnant too? Had he replaced her so completely, so quickly, that even the experience of expecting a child was being replicated with another woman? The shopping cart became her only support, the cold metal handle against her trembling fingers. The world spun, the store's soft colors turning into an indistinct blur. She wanted to scream, cry, collapse right there on the polished linoleum floor, but she did none of that. A strength she didn't know she possessed kept her standing, watching. It was Kate who noticed her first. Her eyes, an icy blue, scanned Olivia from head to toe, a slow and judgmental scrutiny that measured her simple clothes, her makeup-free face, her belly that was living proof of a story they were trying to erase. She touched Lucas's arm, a subtle gesture. He turned. The smug smile on his lips died instantly when he saw her. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, which had once looked at her with adoration, now stared with a cutting coldness, as if she were an intruder in his new, perfect world. "Olivia? What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice devoid of any warmth or concern. The question was so absurd that a bitter laugh threatened to escape Olivia's lips. A pregnant woman in a baby store. What did he think she was doing? But the words stuck in her throat, choked by the pain of his indifference. Kate stepped forward, a condescending smile playing on her red lips. "Oh, so you're the she said, the word X laced with a sweet venom, as if it defined Olivia's entire existence. The provocation was deliberate, a jab to test her, to reaffirm her place as the winner. Olivia ignored her, her focus locked on Lucas, the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow. She lifted her chin, her hand protectively over her belly. "I'm buying clothes for my son, Lucas. Our son," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, each word a small battle won against the tremor consuming her. His eyes flicked to her belly for a fraction of a second, a glimpse of something that might be guilt, before darting away quickly. As if the sight of that truth was unbearable. He said nothing. His silence was a confession, a cowardly denial of the child he had helped create. In that moment, Olivia understood. The battle was no longer just about her broken heart. It was about her son's place in the world, a place his own father seemed determined to deny. The scene in the boutique was the catalyst, the reopened wound that refused to heal. In the weeks that followed, Olivia plunged into a silent grief. Memories of the abandonment haunted her at the most inopportune moments. The image of Lucas packing his bags, avoiding her gaze, the hollow words about confusion and pressure echoing in the empty apartment. He had left on a Tuesday morning, and with him took the future they had planned together. Since then, loneliness had become her constant companion. She went to doctor's appointments alone, holding the ultrasound images with trembling hands, trying to memorize every detail to describe to the baby one day. She listened to the powerful sound of the little heart beating, a miracle she witnessed without anyone by her side to share the emotion. The nursery, which should have been a joyful project for two, became her solitary therapy. She painted the walls a soft sage green, assembled the crib piece by piece with the help of online tutorials. Each screw tightened an affirmation of her ability to move forward. But the pain was always there, lurking, in the pitying looks from neighbors, in the well-intentioned but painful questions from relatives. And Lucas? Isn't he coming to see the nursery? Each question was a stab. It was in this state of fragility that an ivory envelope with her name calligraphed in gold letters arrived in the mail. The invitation to Sophia's wedding, Lucas's cousin. Sophia and Olivia had always had a genuine connection, a bond that transcended her relationship with Lucas. Olivia's first reaction was to throw the invitation in the trash. The idea of facing the entire Harrington family, of being the center of whispered attentions, was terrifying. But then, a new resolve began to form in her chest. Why should she hide? Why should she give up the ties she still valued because of his cowardice? She wouldn't go. Not for him, not to defy him, but for herself, for her dignity. She called the local seamstress and asked for an alteration on an emerald silk dress that had been stored away for ages, a dress that now would hug and enhance the curve of her belly, transforming what some saw as a symbol of abandonment into an emblem of strength and life. The day of the party arrived with a dramatically cloudy sky, a reflection of the turmoil inside her. As she entered the ballroom, a stunning space decorated with opulent arrangements of white flowers and gold details, Olivia felt all eyes turn to her. The green dress made her stand out in the crowd, and her belly was a beacon. She walked with her head held high, her heart pounding hard but her step firm. She found Sophia, who hugged her with sincere affection, whispering, "You look stunning. I'm so glad you came." The comfort of that hug was a balm, but the peace didn't last long. From across the room she saw them arrive. Lucas, elegant in a tailored dark suit, and Kate in a blood-red dress that seemed designed to draw all eyes. They walked arm in arm, smiling and waving, the image of manufactured happiness. The conversations around shifted tone, the whispers becoming more audible. Olivia could feel the curious and pitying gazes on her. The couple approached the group where she was, and the tension became palpable. Kate, with her mastery of subtle cruelty, seized the opportunity. "It's a beautiful night to celebrate new beginnings, don't you think?" she said, looking directly at Olivia, her smile never wavering. The dig was clear, sharp as a stiletto. And Lucas? He remained silent, a passive spectator, just as he did when he wanted someone else to do the dirty work for him. His silence was louder than any insult. It was confirmation of his complicity, his tacit approval of her humiliation. In that gilded ballroom, surrounded by familiar faces that now seemed strange, Olivia felt a chill that didn't come from the air conditioning. It was the chill of contempt, of erasure. She realized that, to them, she was no longer a person. She was a problem to be ignored, a memory to be erased, and the war for her identity was just beginning. The wedding party was the turning point, the final push into the abyss. In the days and weeks that followed, Olivia plunged into a period of deep darkness. The fortress she had tried to build around herself crumbled, brick by brick. Nights became her enemy, bringing persistent insomnia, populated by nightmares where she saw herself running through endless hallways, trying to reach an empty crib. Anxiety attacks ambushed her without warning, in the middle of the grocery store or while driving, her chest tightening, the air becoming thin, panic swallowing her whole. She isolated herself from the world, cancelling lunches with the few friends who still insisted, silencing her phone that buzzed with worried calls from her mother. The energy to pretend everything was fine simply ran out. Her apartment, once a refuge, became a cell. The walls seemed to shrink, and the silence was filled only by the sound of her own irregular breathing. It was during this period that she started writing letters to the baby. In a hardbound notebook, she poured out everything she couldn't say out loud. They were raw confessions full of fear and love. "My son," she wrote one night, tears staining the ink. "Forgive me if sometimes Mommy seems sad. It's just that the world out here is complicated. But I want you to know right now that you are the most loved and wanted thing that has ever happened to me. And I swear I'll be enough for both of us." Writing became her only act of resistance, a way to connect with the future, to remind herself of the reason she needed to keep fighting. Even so, doubt gnawed at her. What Lucas and Kate had done wasn't just an act of betrayal, it was an act of erasure. They were replacing her not just as a wife, but in her terrified mind, as if Kate could somehow usurp her place as mother. The idea was irrational, but pain doesn't obey logic. It was on a grey, rainy afternoon, when the New York sky seemed to cry with her, that a firm and unexpected knock sounded at her door. Hesitant, she dragged herself from the couch, her heart racing with apprehension. Opening the door, she faced a face from the past. Ethan Brooks, ex-partner and once friend of Lucas. He was soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and his eyes carried a weight Olivia recognized as guilt. "Olivia, sorry to show up like this," he said, his voice low and grave. "But there are things you need to know. Things Lucas did, and is planning to do." She let him in, her body tense with distrust and fear. Ethan didn't beat around the bush. Sitting on the edge of the couch, he unraveled the brutal truth. Lucas hadn't left her just for Kate. He was drowning in debts and fraud accusations at the company they owned together. Ethan had confronted him, and Lucas, instead of taking responsibility, chose to run, using his new relationship with the daughter of a powerful investor as his escape route and financial salvation. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. "It's not just that, Olivia," Ethan continued, his voice urgent. "He doesn't just want to get rid of the past. He wants to steal your future." Ethan then revealed the monstrous plan. Lucas, with Kate's help and unscrupulous lawyers, was building a dossier to declare her emotionally unstable and, based on that, seek sole custody of the baby as soon as he was born. He was using her depression, her isolation, direct consequences of his abandonment, as a weapon against her. Ethan pulled a USB drive from his jacket pocket. Here are the proofs. Email exchanges between him and the lawyers, conversations with Kate where she already talks about taking over raising the child to give him a stable environment. He even bought a report from a psychologist who's never seen you. He thinks you're too broken to fight back. Olivia's world disintegrated and rebuilt in that instant. The pain was excruciating, a betrayal on a level she could never have imagined. He didn't just want to leave her. He wanted to destroy her, erase her existence, and steal the only thing she had left, her son. For a long moment she couldn't breathe. But then, amid the rubble of her heart, something new and fierce awakened. It was no longer just sadness or hurt. It was fury, a cold, clear, determined fury. The news that should have annihilated her actually resurrected her. She looked at the USB drive in her hand, that small plastic object containing so much poison, but also her salvation. She wasn't a helpless victim. She was a mother, and a mother about to go to war. The awakening was like emerging from a long drowning. The apathy that had held her captive dissipated, replaced by a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in months. The first person she called was her mother, Margaret. Hearing her daughter's voice, no longer fragile and whispered but firm and resolute, Margaret didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm on my way." Margaret arrived in less than an hour, bringing not just a grocery bag with fresh bagels and fruits, but also the quiet, unshakable strength that had always defined her. She didn't offer words of pity or easy advice. Instead, she sat next to Olivia at the kitchen table, held her hand and said, What are we going to do first? The use of we was the anchor Olivia needed. She was no longer alone. Together, mother and daughter, they mapped out a battle plan. The first step was finding the right legal representation. Not just any lawyer, but someone who understood the psychological warfare being waged. The name that came up was Dr. Elena Vargas, a renowned family law attorney, known for her relentless approach and passionate defense of women in vulnerable situations. Getting an emergency consultation wasn't easy, but Margaret was persistent, and mentioning procedural fraud and manipulation for parental alienation opened doors. Dr. Vargas's office was modern and sober, an environment exuding competence. The lawyer, a woman with short graying hair and piercing eyes, listened to Olivia's account without interrupting, her face a mask of concentration. Olivia handed over the USB drive Ethan had given her. As the lawyer plugged the device into her computer and reviewed the files, the silence in the room was thick. Olivia watched the micro-expressions on Elena Vargas's face, a slight arch of eyebrows, a subtle tightening of lips. Finally, the lawyer leaned back in her chair, removed her glasses, and looked at Olivia. This isn't just a custody dispute, Olivia. This is an attempt at character assassination. It's cruel, premeditated, and fortunately for us, grossly documented. For the first time in months, Olivia felt a wave of hope. What they didn't count on, continued Dr. Vargas, is that you'd have access to this. They underestimated you. They thought you'd be so devastated you'd accept any scraps. That's the classic mistake of the arrogant. From that day on, Olivia's life took on a new rhythm. Under Elena's guidance, she began building her counter-offensive. The dossier Lucas was assembling against her would be eclipsed by the one they would build against him. Every step was meticulously planned. Olivia underwent a full psychological evaluation with an expert recommended by the lawyer, a professional who documented not just her distress, but also her resilience and deep connection to the pregnancy. She gathered witnesses, cousin Sophia, who could attest to the nature of the relationship and the affection that had always existed, neighbors who saw her taking care of herself and the apartment, and even the seamstress who altered her dress, a subtle proof that she wasn't hiding from the world. Every medical certificate, every receipt from the baby boutique, every message exchanged with her mother became a piece of the armor they were forging. Ethan's USB drive was the sword. While the legal battle took shape behind the scenes, Olivia waged another, more intimate one, rebuilding herself. With Margaret's support, she returned to caring for her health, taking light walks in Central Park, practicing prenatal yoga. She redecorated Noah's nursery, the name she had chosen meaning rest or comfort, no longer with a sense of defiance but with pure joy. Every detail from the Star Mobile to the soft rug was a celebration of the life to come, a life she would protect tooth and nail. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and no longer saw the abandoned woman. She saw a warrior. The prominent belly was no longer a reminder of betrayal, but her shield, the center of her strength. She was fighting not just for herself, but for him. And that realization gave her a power Lucas could never comprehend. The hearing was scheduled. Elena Vargas's strategy was bold. Instead of waiting for Lucas's attack, they would preempt it, requesting a protective order and provisional sole custody based on the evidence of manipulation. They would enter the courtroom not as defendants, but as plaintiffs. On the eve of the hearing, anxiety tried to settle in, but Olivia fought it with a newfound calm. She spent the night reading to Noah, her soft voice filling the apartment's silence, her hand on her belly feeling her son's gentle movements, as if he were telling her he was there with her. That night, she understood that victory in court would be important, but the true victory was already happening inside her. She had found herself again, not in someone else's arms, but in her own strength. The day in court was a blur of tension and adrenaline. The courthouse, with its cold, echoing hallways, was an intimidating setting. Olivia saw Lucas and Kate across the hall. He looked pale, his usual arrogance replaced by poorly disguised apprehension. Kate, at his side, maintained a facade of confidence, but her eyes darted nervously everywhere. They seemed smaller, less powerful under the cold, impersonal light of justice. When they entered the courtroom, a small and stuffy space, the air grew heavy. Lucas's lawyer began his argument, painting a picture of Olivia as an unstable, depressed woman incapable of caring for a child. He presented the bought psychological report, citing emotional outbursts and erratic behavior. Olivia felt her blood boil, but a reassuring touch from Elena on her arm kept her centered. Then it was Elena's turn. She stood up, calm and methodical, and began dismantling the farce, piece by piece. First, she presented the report from the expert who evaluated Olivia. A robust document describing a woman going through understandable grief, but psychologically sound and extremely fit for motherhood. Next, she called the psychologist who signed Lucas's report to testify. Under Elena's incisive questioning, the man stammered, contradicted himself, and finally admitted he had never met Olivia, basing his diagnosis solely on third-party accounts. In this case, Lucas. The judge, a man with a stern expression, made a note in his notebook, his face a scowl. The coup de grace came with the evidence from the USB drive. Elena Vargas requested permission to play an audio. Kate's voice filled the room, metallic and cruel. "You need to push it, Lucas. Say she threatened you, that she has breakdowns. We need to take the kid from her as soon as possible to give him a real home. I'll handle everything, you know." The silence that followed was tomb-like. Kate went white as a sheet, her eyes wide in panic. Lucas sank into his chair, his face in his hands. He didn't look at Olivia, didn't dare. The mask had fallen, revealing the monstrosity beneath. The judge looked at the couple with visible contempt. He didn't need anything more. The hearing was adjourned. The decision, he announced, would be swift. As they left the room, Lucas passed by Olivia, a defeated man. His silence, which had once been a weapon of humiliation, was now the sound of his capitulation. Olivia felt no triumph, not even hatred. She felt only the deep, exhausted relief of someone who had survived a long and terrible war. The judge's decision came out late that afternoon. It was more than Elena Vargas had hoped for. Sole custody granted to Olivia, with fair child support set. All of Lucas's allegations were dismissed and classified as bad faith litigation. And to top it off, the judge ordered a criminal investigation into Lucas for procedural fraud and into the psychologist for false statements. The victory was total, crushing. Olivia cried in the car on the way home, a cry not of sadness, but of liberation. It was the end of a chapter and the beginning of everything. Months later, on a spring night, Olivia's water broke. The labor was long, challenging, but she wasn't alone. Her mother, Margaret, held her hand throughout, a constant and calming presence. And at 3:17 a.m., Noah came into the world, with a strong cry and healthy lungs. When the nurse placed him in her arms, the outside world vanished. There was only the warmth of that little body against hers, the smell of new life, the tiny eyes that opened to meet hers. It was a love so overwhelming, so pure, that it healed all remaining wounds. In that hospital room, holding her son, Olivia knew everything she had gone through was worth it. Lucas never showed up. His absence, which would have once devastated her, was now a gift. Noah would have a start in life free of toxicity, surrounded only by love. Life settled into a new and happy routine. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, lullabies whispered in the dark. Every moment was precious. Olivia found a strength she didn't know she had. Infinite patience, a joy that sprang from the simplest things. Noah's first smile, the way his little fingers clutched hers. One day, while organizing some papers, she found the notebook where she had written letters to her son during her darkest days. She read it, not with pain but with a new perspective. She saw the journey of a woman who had been broken and who, alone, pieced her shards back together and rebuilt herself stronger. And that's when the idea struck. She couldn't keep that experience to herself. There were other women out there feeling invisible, broken, silenced. She needed to reach them. With the help of some friends and support from a local community center, she created a support group. The name was simple and powerful, Forged by Fire. The first meeting had just 5 women, all with stories of pain, betrayal, and manipulation. Sitting in a circle, they shared their experiences, many for the first time. Olivia told her own story, unfiltered, without shame. She spoke of the boutique, the wedding, the courtroom, but above all she spoke of rebirth. They tried to erase us, she said, looking into each one's eyes. But they failed. Because what they don't understand is that you don't erase a woman. When they try, she doesn't disappear, she's forged. The fire didn't consume us. It tempered us. In that moment, seeing the tears of recognition and smiles of hope around her, Olivia understood her true purpose. The victory over Lucas wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of her mission. She had built a new life, not on the ashes of the old, but from the strengthened metal that emerged from the flames. A life strong, free, and finally luminous. The news about the Forged by Fire group spread organically, word of mouth, online forums, and whispers of encouragement. What started with 5 women in a borrowed room transformed in a few months into a vibrant community. Olivia, who never imagined herself as a leader, discovered a natural ability to welcome and empower. She didn't offer magical solutions, but something far more valuable, a safe space for validating pain and celebrating resilience. The meetings were a tapestry of stories, some whispered with choked voices, others told with a just and healing anger. There were women who, like her, faced abandonment during pregnancy, others fighting to break free from emotionally abusive relationships, still others trying to rebuild their self-esteem after years of being diminished and controlled. In each story, Olivia saw a fragment of her own, and in her story they saw the possibility of a different future. She divided her time between caring for Noah, who grew visibly, becoming a curious and giggling boy, and volunteer work with the group. Her life was full, but not in a grandiose or glamorous way. It was a fullness built on small moments, the smell of breakfast while Noah babbled in his high chair, the satisfaction of seeing a woman in the group lift her head and speak with a firm voice for the first time, the peace of falling asleep with a tired but peaceful heart. The legal process against Lucas continued in the courts, a distant echo of a life that no longer seemed hers. Elena Vargas handled everything with quiet efficiency, updating her only when necessary. The investigation into the frauds at Lucas's old company deepened, revealing a web of corruption more complex than Ethan had imagined. Kate's and her father's names were also dragged into the scandal, not as direct accomplices, but as beneficiaries of a scheme now under financial media scrutiny. One day, while pushing Noah's stroller through a sunny park, Olivia ran into Ethan Brooks. He was thinner, with dark circles revealing sleepless nights, but his eyes had a new lightness. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine smile without the weight of guilt. "He's huge," he said, pointing to Noah, who was trying to reach a leaf that had fallen in his lap. "He's my world," Olivia replied, the simplicity of the phrase carrying the full weight of her journey. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of the stroller wheels on the gravel the only soundtrack. "I wanted to thank you again, Ethan. You didn't have to do what you did. You risked a lot." He shrugged, his gaze lost on the horizon. "I had to. For years, I watched Lucas manipulate people, use his charm to get what he wanted, always leaving a trail of damage he never looked back at. I was complicit in my silence. What he did to you, Anna, was the last straw. I couldn't be the loyal friend to a man without honor anymore. It was about saving myself too." The conversation led them to a nearby cafe. While Noah slept serenely in the stroller, Ethan talked about the consequences of his decision. He had completely broken from the social circle he shared with Lucas, faced distrust from old business partners, but in the process had rediscovered his own values. He was starting over, with a smaller, more ethical company, and a peace of mind money couldn't buy. "And you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You seem different, not just okay. You seem strong." Olivia smiled. "I am strong. I just didn't know it. I think I needed someone to try to destroy me to discover what I'm made of." That afternoon, a new friendship solidified, born not of convenience or shared stories of parties and dinners, but of a crisis that revealed the true character of both. Life, however, has a way of bringing the past back when least expected. A few weeks later, Olivia received a call from an unknown number. It was Sophia, Lucas's cousin. Her voice was tense, hesitant. "Olivia, I know I have no right to ask you anything, but my aunt, Lucas's mother, she's not well. Since all this came out, her health has deteriorated a lot. She asks about you. She always liked you a lot." Olivia felt a knot in her stomach, Evelyn, her ex-mother-in-law, had always been a kind woman, though somewhat passive in the face of her son's dominating personality. She found herself in a dilemma. Visiting Evelyn meant reopening a door to the family that had hurt her so much. But ignoring a sick woman's request seemed cruel. After talking to her mother, who wisely said, "Do what your heart tells you, not what the hurt dictates," Olivia made a decision. She went to the hospital the next day without Noah. She found Evelyn in a private room, pale and frail, hooked up to monitors beeping softly. Seeing Olivia, the older woman's eyes filled with tears. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice weak. "You were always the one with a truly good heart in that family." Olivia sat by the bed, holding Evelyn's cold hand. They didn't talk about Lucas or the process or Kate. They talked about simple things, about the rose garden Evelyn loved so much, about the color of Noah's eyes. But before Olivia left, Evelyn held her with surprising strength. "He wasn't always like this, you know. Or maybe he was. And I didn't want to see. I spoiled him, protected him too much. I failed him. And because of that, he failed you. Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for the pain my son caused you." Evelyn's tears were of deep regret, the pain of a mother recognizing her part in creating the monster. Olivia hugged her, and in that hug, she didn't forgive Lucas, but freed herself from the last remnant of anger she still held for that family. She left the hospital feeling lighter, as if she had finally cut the last anchor tying her to the past. Meanwhile, Lucas's empire crumbled publicly. The news about the frauds became a national scandal, irreparably tarnishing the Harrington family name. Kate's father, to save his own skin, issued an official statement cutting all professional and personal ties with Lucas, claiming to have been deceived by the trust placed in a future family member. The engagement, never formalized with a ring but with appearances in society columns, was undone in a whisper of humiliation. Kate vanished from the spotlight, her image of a powerful woman replaced by that of a foolish socialite who had been used and discarded. Rumors said she had moved abroad, seeking the anonymity she once despised. Lucas's final trial was scheduled, not the family one, which was already resolved, but the criminal one. Olivia was called as a witness, not for the fraud itself, but for his pattern of manipulative behavior. Her testimony, delivered with a calm and clarity that impressed the court, was the final piece connecting his financial dishonesty to his moral dishonesty. She didn't accuse him with anger. She simply presented the facts, the timeline of how he tried to use the legal system to silence her and steal her son. It was devastating in its simplicity. Lucas, sitting in the defendant's box, looked like a shadow of the man he once was. The expensive suit couldn't hide how shrunken he was, the sparkle in his eyes replaced by opaque fear. He was sentenced to years in prison, a sentence that included not just the financial crimes, but also the procedural fraud against her. Justice, slow and sometimes tortuous, had finally prevailed. On the night the sentence was announced, Olivia didn't celebrate. She put Noah to sleep, sat in the armchair in his room, and watched the fine rain fall outside. She felt no joy at Lucas's fall, but a deep and solemn relief. It was the end. The period at the end of a story that had taken her to hell and back. She thought of all the women forged by fire, their own battles, their own silent victories. Her story was just one among many, but now she had a platform to turn her pain into a beacon. She grabbed her laptop and started writing. Not a letter to her son, but a sketch of a bigger project, a book, an organization, a movement. She didn't know exactly what it would be, but she knew her voice. The voice Lucas had tried to silence was just beginning to be heard. The sound of the rain was like soft applause, and for the first time in a long time, Olivia looked to the future and saw an infinite horizon of possibilities, an open sky she had conquered herself. Time from that point on took on a new quality. It stopped being an enemy to endure and became an ally. A craftsman weaving Olivia and Noah's days with threads of normalcy and joy. Life unfolded into a tapestry of precious moments. Noah's first wobbly steps across the room, his chubby little hand pointing at the neighbor's dog. His first word, "Mama," said with a clarity that made Olivia's heart overflow. Each milestone in her son's development was a personal victory. living proof that the love and stability she had fought so hard to build were flourishing. The apartment, once a scene of loneliness and fear, now echoed with childish laughter and the sound of building blocks falling to the floor. It was the sound of life in its purest and noisiest state. The Forged by Fire group also grew and evolved. Olivia, with help from other women who became pillars of the community, started organizing practical workshops, family law basics with volunteer attorneys, financial education classes for women needing to reclaim their independence, group therapy sessions with partner psychologists. The project born from her pain was becoming a tangible force for change in many lives. She discovered a talent for organization and a passion for connecting people and resources. Seeing one woman get a protective order, another land a job, another simply smile with genuine lightness for the first time in years brought Olivia deep satisfaction, a sense of purpose no previous professional success had given her. She wasn't just healing herself, she was helping build an army of women who refused to be victims. Her friendship with Ethan deepened, becoming a constant and comforting presence in her life. He was Uncle Ethan to Noah, always showing up with a new toy or infinite patience for hide and seek. For Olivia, he was a confidant, someone she could talk openly to about the challenges of being a single mum and the joys of seeing her project grow. There was no romance between them, but something perhaps rarer and more precious, mutual respect and genuine affection, forged in honesty and overcoming a shared crisis. He encouraged her to take Forged by Fire to the next level, to seek funding, to formalize the organization. What you've created, Olivia, is bigger than you think. This needs to reach more people. The book idea, born on a rainy night, began to take shape. Olivia spent the early mornings after Noah fell asleep writing. It wasn't an autobiography to expose her wounds, but a guide, a manifesto. She intertwined her story with those of other women from the group, anonymously and with permission, creating a mosaic of experiences that illustrated tactics of emotional manipulation, challenges of the judicial system, and most importantly, paths to reconstruction. The writing was a cathartic and demanding process. Reliving certain moments was painful, but now she did it from a position of power, analyzing the events with the distance of a survivor, not the anguish of a victim. The title she chose was I Forged from Silence to Sentence. One day, while researching publishers, she came across the name of an editor-in-chief at a small but respected publishing house focused on women's voices and impactful non-fiction. The name was familiar, Victoria Hayes. She was an old college classmate, someone Olivia hadn't spoken to in years, but whom she had always admired for her intelligence and determination. With a mix of nervousness and audacity, Olivia sent an email attaching the first 3 chapters of her manuscript. Hi, Victoria. You might not remember me, but we studied together. A lot has happened since then. I think I've written a book that might interest you. The response came in less than 24 hours. Olivia? Of course I remember you. I read what you sent in one sitting. I'm speechless. We need to talk. Urgently. The meeting with Victoria was a whirlwind. The editor not only loved what she read, but saw potential for something much bigger. This isn't just a book, Olivia. It's a movement. Your voice is authentic, your story powerful, and the way you turn it into a tool for other women is brilliant. We're not just going to publish this, we're going to make noise. The contract was signed. The editing process was intense, but collaborative. Victoria helped Olivia refine her writing, organize the stories even more impactfully, turn the manuscript into a polished work ready for the world. During this period, Olivia felt like an artist discovering a new medium of expression. The woman who had once been silenced was now about to have her voice printed and distributed in bookstores across the country. Meanwhile, the final chapter of Lucas's saga unfolded in prison. The news that arrived was sparse, through newspaper articles or comments from Sophia, with whom Olivia still kept sporadic contact. Apparently, life behind bars had stripped Lucas of all his arrogance. Without his charm, money, and connections to manipulate the environment, he was just another number, a man who had lost everything. His mother, Evelyn, passed away a few months after his sentencing, a final blow that, according to Sophia, broke him in a way even prison couldn't. He refused visitors, isolating himself in a silence that this time wasn't a weapon but a surrender. Olivia felt nothing hearing these updates. No pity, no satisfaction. Lucas had become an irrelevant figure, a ghost from a distant past. Her energy was focused on the vibrant present and promising future. The book launch was an event that exceeded all of Olivia's expectations. The bookstore was packed. Women from Forged by Fire, friends, family, journalists, and many unfamiliar faces. Women who had read about the book and felt represented. Her mother, Margaret, was in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Ethan was beside her, holding a slightly impatient Noah who smiled seeing his mom on the small stage. When Olivia stood to speak, a wave of emotion washed over her. She looked at the crowd and didn't see just readers. She saw a congregation of survivors and allies. "Good evening," she began, her voice firm but laden with feeling. "A few years ago I was in a baby boutique, feeling like the most invisible and broken woman in the world. I thought my story was over. Today, looking at each of you, I understand that wasn't my story ending. It was my story beginning. This book isn't about my pain. It's about our power. The power we discover when we refuse to be silenced, when we turn our scars into maps to guide other women out of the darkness. For every woman who's ever felt erased, discarded, or broken, you're not alone. You're not what they did to you. You're what you choose to become from now on. You're a force to be reckoned with. You're forged." A thunderous applause filled the bookstore, a sound that was more than approval. It was a collective cry of recognition and power. That night, signing copies of her book, hearing the whispered stories of women thanking her for voicing their feelings, Olivia knew, without a doubt, that she had found her place in the world. She was no longer Lucas Harrington's ex-wife. She was Olivia Thompson, author, activist, mother. And her story, the real one, was just beginning to be written. The success of I Forged was meteoric and surprising. The book didn't just sell well, it became a cultural phenomenon, a reference point in discussions about abusive relationships and women's empowerment. Olivia was invited to TV shows, podcasts, and university panels. At first, the exposure made her nervous, but she quickly realized each interview was an opportunity to amplify the Forged by Fire message to an audience she might never reach otherwise. She learned to navigate this new world with the same grace and firmness that guided her personal life. Her authenticity was her greatest asset. She didn't speak in self-help jargon, but with the raw honesty of someone who had lived what she preached. With advancing sales and public recognition came financial resources. For the first time, Olivia had more than enough to live comfortably. The first thing she did was buy a larger apartment in a tree-lined neighborhood, with a small backyard for Noah to play. It was a space she chose, paid for, and decorated, a home without ghosts, just the promise of a happy future. Next, she invested most of her earnings in formalizing Forged by Fire. With Ethan's help offering his management expertise and Elena Vargas handling the legal side, the support group transformed into the Forged Institute. The organization now had headquarters, a team of hired professionals, psychologists, social workers, lawyers, and the capacity to offer free, structured support to hundreds of women. The dream born in her small apartment was now a solid institution, a beacon of hope with a fixed address. Noah, now a little boy almost 4 years old, was the gravitational center of her life. He was a happy, outgoing, affectionate child, oblivious to the storm that preceded his birth. Olivia was careful explaining the absence of a father figure. She didn't lie, but adapted the truth to his age. "Daddy lives very, very far away, my love, but you have Mommy, Grandma Margaret, Uncle Ethan, and a bunch of people who love you more than anything in the world." She was determined to raise him without the poison of resentment, teaching him about respect, empathy, and the importance of treating all people with dignity. The lessons Lucas never learned. Her relationship with Ethan remained a pillar of her life. Their friendship was easy, deep, and free of complications. They were the family they chose for each other, celebrating birthdays, caring for one another on sick days, and sharing life's joys and frustrations. Many people, including her mother, suggested there was something more there, a romance waiting to happen. Olivia smiled but didn't feel that need. What she and Ethan had was so complete and satisfying in its current form that she feared trying to turn it into something else might break the spell. One day, a letter arrived at the institute, addressed personally to her. The sender was from a small town she didn't recognize. Inside, an elegant and slightly shaky handwriting covered 2 pages. It was from Kate Sinclair. Olivia felt a chill seeing the name, an involuntary reaction to an old trauma. Her first impulse was to tear the letter, but curiosity and perhaps a need to close that circle once and for all made her read. The letter wasn't an apology, not in the traditional sense. It was a recounting. Kate told how, after the scandal, she moved to the countryside to live with an aunt seeking anonymity. She described how public humiliation forced her to look at herself for the first time without the veneer of money and status. She portrayed Lucas not as a monster, but as a hollow man, a vacuum sucking the energy and identity from whoever was nearby. "I didn't fall in love with him," Kate wrote. "I fell in love with the idea of power he projected. I wanted to win, and you were the obstacle. I didn't see you as a person with feelings with a son. I saw you as a problem to be eliminated. And that dehumanization, I realize now, is the root of all cruelty." At the end of the letter, she said she had read Olivia's book. "Your story told by you made me see mine. I don't ask for your forgiveness because I don't think I deserve it, but I write to say that what you did, the way you rose up and used your voice, didn't just change your life, it changed mine too. Thank you." Olivia folded the letter slowly, her heart beating strangely. She felt no compassion, no anger. She felt a kind of melancholic peace. Kate, the perfect antagonist in her story, was also in her own way a victim of the same system of power and manipulation. She had been a piece in Lucas's game, a willing and cruel piece, but still a piece. The letter was final proof that the shockwave of her decision to fight had extended far beyond her own life, creating ripples in places she never imagined. She kept the letter, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of human nature's complexity and the capacity for transformation, even in the darkest circumstances. Life continued with its rhythms and surprises. The Forged Institute received a major human rights award, bringing even more visibility and funding. Olivia became an influential voice on the national scene, consulted for developing public policies on women's protection. She traveled the country giving lectures, but always ensured she was never away from Noah for more than 2 nights. He was her north, her unnegotiable priority. On one of these trips, to a conference in Los Angeles, she reconnected with Victoria Hayes, her editor, who had become a great friend. They dined at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, celebrating the book's ongoing success and the Institute's new projects. "You know, Olivia," Victoria said, stirring her wineglass, "sometimes I wonder if you've thought about yourself, about having a new relationship, falling in love again." Olivia smiled, a genuine smile. "I fall in love every day, Victoria. I fall in love with my son's smile, with a woman's progress at the Institute, with the beauty of a sunny day. Romantic love. It's no longer the center of my universe. For a long time, my identity was defined by being someone's wife, then ex-wife. Today my identity is mine. I'm Olivia. And I'm so happy and complete being just me that the idea of merging with someone else seems unnecessary. If it happens one day, great. But it's not a search. It's not an empty space that needs filling." Victoria looked at her with admiration. "You're the most resolved woman I know." Returning to New York, Olivia felt immense gratitude for the life she had built. A life not free of challenges or fatigue, but authentic, meaningful, and full of love in its varied forms. That night, after putting Noah to bed and reading him a story about a brave little bear, she sat on her balcony, looking at the city lights. She thought of Lucas, a figure increasingly distant, almost fictional. He had tried to trap her in a story of tragedy and abandonment, but she had refused to be just a character in his drama. She took the script, tore it to shreds, and wrote her own epic, a story of resilience, community, and self-discovery, a story that didn't end with "and they lived happily ever after beside a prince," but with the image of a queen building her own castle, brick by brick, strong, unshakable, and luminous, and that she knew was the best story of all. Years passed. Noah was no longer a boy, but a preteen of 12, with the same curious gaze he had as a baby, but now with a sharp intelligence and a sense of humor that was the joy of the house. The Forged Institute had become a national reference, with branches in several major cities, a model of welcoming and transformation. Olivia, now in her 40s, wore her hair with some silver strands she refused to dye, calling them wisdom highlights. She was a respected public figure, but her private life remained her sanctuary, shared only with her son, her mother, and her closest circle of friends, where Ethan continued to be a constant paternal presence for Noah. The surprise came in the form of an official notification, a cold and bureaucratic document that arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Lucas Harrington, after serving most of his sentence and obtaining parole for good behavior, was filing a petition in court. The request wasn't for money nor for Noah's custody. It was something much more complex and, for Olivia, much more disturbing. He was asking for the right to meet his son. The petition was worded in a humble, almost pleading tone. It spoke of regret, years of reflection in prison, the fundamental right of a father to know his child, and of the child to know his biological origin. Attached was a psychological report from the prison, describing a transformed man, aware of his mistakes and seeking a form of redemption. The news hit like a bomb in Olivia's carefully built world. Her first reaction was visceral fury. After everything? After trying to steal her son, trying to destroy her, he now dared, in the name of a supposed transformation, to invade their peace. She called Elena Vargas, her voice shaking with anger. "He's not getting near my son, Elena. Never." The lawyer, always the voice of reason, calmed her. "Legally, Olivia, the situation is delicate. He was stripped of parental rights, but his request isn't for rights, it's for contact. A judge might see this as a reasonable request from a man who's paid his debt to society. We need to be strategic. But the hardest battle wouldn't be in court. It would be in her own home." That night, she sat with Noah, whose radar for his mother's emotions was infallible. "Mom, what happened? You've been weird since that paper arrived." Olivia took a deep breath. She had always promised to be honest with him. "Noah, we need to talk about your biological father." She told him, in an age-appropriate way, about Lucas. She didn't paint him as a monster, but as a man who made terrible choices, who hurt her a lot, and who, because of those choices, was never present. Then she told him about the request. Noah's reaction wasn't what she expected. He didn't show anger or fear. He was silent for a long time, processing. Then he looked at her with a seriousness that made him seem much older and asked, "Is he a bad person?" Olivia hesitated. "He did very bad things, my son." Noah pondered. "But can people change? Don't you say that at the Institute, that people can rebuild themselves?" The question hit her like a punch. Her own discourse, her life philosophy, being used in a context she never imagined. "Yes, I do say that," she replied, her voice low. "Then," Noah continued, "I don't want a dad. I already have you and Uncle Ethan. But I'm curious. I want to see his face. I want to ask my own questions. I want to decide for myself if he's a bad person now." That conversation changed everything. Olivia realized the fight was no longer about protecting him from Lucas. It was about trusting the strength, intelligence, and character of the son she had raised. Forbidding him from knowing his origin, however toxic, wouldn't be an act of protection but of control. It would be repeating, in another way, Lucas's mistake, making a decision about someone else's life without giving them a voice. With a heavy heart but a new clarity, she shifted strategy. She and Elena proposed a meeting, but on her terms, in a neutral environment with a mediating psychologist present, and on the condition that it would be the only meeting unless Noah expressed a desire for more. The day of the meeting was the most tense of her life since the first hearing. The man who entered the mediation room was almost unrecognizable. The arrogant, charming Lucas had given way to an older man, thin, with slumped shoulders and a tired, haunted gaze. He didn't look at Olivia. His eyes were fixed on Noah, a mix of awe, pain, and deep regret. The psychologist led the conversation, but it was Noah who took the reins. He didn't ask about the past, about the betrayal. He asked direct, almost existential questions. "Why do you want to meet me now? What did you learn in prison? What do you expect to happen?" Lucas answered with a brutal honesty that surprised everyone. He spoke of his arrogance, his emptiness, how he used people to fill a hole he had dug himself. "I expect nothing," he said, his voice hoarse. I needed you to know your existence wasn't a mistake to me. It was the only real thing I ever created, and I ran from it because I was terrified. I don't ask to be your father. I just ask that, when you think of me, you don't think only of the man who abandoned you, but of the man who, too late, understood the value of what he lost." In the end, Noah stood up, walked to Lucas, and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Lucas." The handshake was brief, but it sealed something profound. They never saw each other again. Lucas moved to a small town in the south, living an anonymous and reclusive life. But for Noah, that meeting was a rite of passage. He didn't gain a father, but he got rid of a ghost. He confronted his origin and came out the other side whole, with his identity strengthened. For Olivia, it was the final and hardest lesson. True empowerment wasn't just about fighting your demons, but about having the wisdom and courage to allow those you love to fight theirs, and trusting that you've prepared them well for the battle. And that's the story I wanted to share with you today, a journey that started with a tear in a baby store and ended with a handshake that redefined the meaning of strength and forgiveness. Not the forgiveness that forgets, but the one that frees. If this story touched you in some way, if you saw yourself in any moment of Olivia's journey, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe here on the channel, leave your comment. I read every one of them. And tell me, on a scale of 0 to 10, what score do you give to the strength Olivia discovered within herself? Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.